The February cold pressed against the grocery store windows like an uninvited guest. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song above aisles of canned goods and winter vegetables. Margaret Chen stood in the produce section, her weathered hands hovering over a display of apples. She selected three, just three, placing each one carefully in her basket as if they were made of glass. She was 74 and moved through the world like a shadow of herself. The apartment she returned to each evening still held Richard's reading glasses on the nightstand, still smelled faintly of his aftershave, though he'd been gone 2 years now. Their children lived across the country, busy with lives that had no room for a grieving mother who insisted she was fine, and she was fine. She told herself this every morning, every night, and in all the quiet hours between. Margaret pushed her cart through the aisles with practiced efficiency. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a small container of soup. The store was nearly empty at this hour, 4 in the afternoon, when most people were still at work or picking up children from school. She preferred it this way. Less noise, less pretending. At the checkout line, she waited behind a young man who couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. He wore a thin jacket despite the winter cold, and his sneakers had seen better days. His cart held an odd collection: ramen noodles, a gallon of milk, baby formula, diapers, and a small cake with pink frosting. Margaret watched as the cashier rang up each item, the total climbing higher. The young man pulled out a worn wallet, counting bills carefully. His fingers trembled slightly as he counted again, then a third time. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 apologies. "Can you take off the cake and maybe put back the milk?" The cashier sighed, reaching for the items. Margaret saw the young man's jaw tighten, saw him swallow hard. His eyes were dark and kind, even in their exhaustion. "Wait," Margaret heard herself say. The word came out before she'd made the decision, pulled from some deep place inside her that still remembered what it meant to need someone. "Put it all through. I'll pay for it." The young man turned, surprise washing over his features. "Ma'am, I couldn't—" "You could," Margaret said gently, already pulling out her credit card. "And you will. But the cake it's my daughter's birthday. It's not necessary. I can't let you—" Margaret looked at him then, really looked at him. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, the way his jacket hung on his thin frame, the determination mixed with desperation in his expression. She saw someone trying so hard to hold it all together. "How old is she?" Margaret asked. "She turns 2 today." His voice cracked slightly. "Her mom, she passed away when Emma was 6 months old. It's just us now." The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the store, a phone rang. Margaret's heart, that tired muscle she'd thought incapable of feeling anything new, squeezed tight. "Then the cake is especially necessary," she said, handing her card to the cashier. "Birthdays are important. They're how we mark that we're still here, still trying." The young man's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to let fall. "I don't know how to thank you. I'm Daniel Torres. I'm a student at the community college, trying to become a doctor, and my aunt watches Emma while I'm in class. But money is so tight and He stopped himself, perhaps realizing he was explaining too much to a stranger. But Margaret didn't feel like a stranger. She felt like someone who'd been waiting for this moment without knowing it. "Margaret Chen," she said, offering her hand. "And you just thanked me by telling me your name. That's enough." Daniel helped her load her own few items into a bag, insisting despite her protests. At the exit, he paused, turning back to her with an expression of such pure gratitude that it hurt to look at. "I'm going to pay you back one day," he said. "I promise. I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to help people the way you helped me today. I won't forget this." Margaret smiled, a real smile that felt strange on her face. "Just take care of that little girl. That's all the payment I need. Happy birthday to Emma." She watched him walk to an old sedan parked at the far end of the lot, watched him place the groceries carefully in the trunk, watched him sit behind the wheel for a moment with his head bowed. Then she got into her own car and drove home to her too-quiet apartment, where Richard's ghost still waited in every corner. But something had shifted. Some small window in her chest had opened, letting in a sliver of light. The years passed like water through fingers. Margaret's children called more often, visited occasionally. She joined a book club at the library. She volunteered at the community center. She learned to live with loss instead of drowning in it. The grocery store encounter faded into memory, a small kindness among many small kindnesses, the way life teaches us to keep going. Her health, however, had its own ideas. The fatigue came first, then the shortness of breath. She ignored it for months, the way the elderly do, as if acknowledging weakness might make it real. But eventually, even her stubbornness couldn't fight the tightness in her chest, the way her heart seemed to forget its rhythm. The hospital bracelet felt cold around her wrist. The cardiologist had been kind but direct. Her heart was failing, slowly but certainly. There would be medications, restrictions, and difficult decisions ahead. At 79, Margaret found herself back in a place of ending, and she was so tired of endings. The home health agency promised they'd send someone good, someone experienced. Margaret didn't care much. She sat in her apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, waiting for another stranger to enter her. Carefully constructed solitude. The knock came at 2 o'clock exactly. She shuffled to the door, pulled it open, and found herself looking at a young man in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck and a medical bag in his hand. He was older than she remembered, broader in the shoulders, more settled in his features. But the eyes were the same, dark and kind, even after everything life had thrown at them. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice catching slightly. "I'm Dr. Torres. I'll be your primary care physician for your home health program." Margaret's breath caught. She reached for the doorframe, suddenly unsteady. "Daniel," she whispered. His professional composure cracked, revealing the boy he'd been beneath the man he'd become. "I told you I'd remember. I told you I'd pay you back." "You became a doctor," she said, wonder threading through her voice. "I became a doctor," he confirmed, stepping inside at her wordless invitation. "It took me 7 years, working nights, every scholarship I could find, living on ramen and hope. But I did it. Emma's 10 now, thriving in school, and I'm here. When I saw your name on my patient list, I had to check 3 times to make sure it was really you." Margaret lowered herself into her favorite chair, the one by the window where afternoon light pooled like honey. "You requested me as a patient." "I requested you as a patient," Daniel admitted, setting his back down. "I hope that's okay. When I saw you needed a home health physician, I couldn't let anyone else do it. Not after what you did for us. Not after you saw us when we were invisible to everyone else." "It was just groceries," Margaret said softly. "It was everything," Daniel corrected gently. "It was someone believing I could make it when I barely believed it myself. It was Emma getting her birthday cake. It was being seen as human when I felt like I was failing at everything. You gave me that, and I've spent years hoping I'd find a way to return it." He pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet, a little girl with wild curls and a brilliant smile, standing next to a younger Daniel in graduation robes. "This was taken at my medical school graduation. She's been asking about the kind lady from the grocery store for years. I told her about you every birthday, how you taught me that kindness doesn't need a reason." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, the first she'd allowed herself in months. "I was so lonely that day. I was buying 3 apples for one person. I was going through the motions of living. You gave me something too, you know. You reminded me that I could still matter." Daniel sat down across from her, the doctor and the boy existing simultaneously in his careful movements. "Then let me matter to you now. Let me take care of you the way you took care of us. Let me be here for the hard parts, because you were there for ours." "Your daughter," Margaret said. "Emma, is she really okay?" "She's more than okay," Daniel said, his whole face lighting up. "She's extraordinary. She wants to be a teacher. She remembers birthdays for everyone in her class. She makes me put extra cookies in her lunch so she can share with kids who forget theirs. She's proof that kindness creates more kindness." Margaret reached for his hand, this young doctor who'd once been a desperate father, counting change. "Then you've already paid me back 1,000 times over. You raised someone good. You became someone who heals. That was always enough." "My first patient visit as a licensed physician," Daniel said quietly, "was supposed to be routine. Instead, it's coming full circle. Mrs. Chen, Margaret, I'm going to take excellent care of you. Not because I owe you, but because you taught me what it means to see people. Really see them." Margaret squeezed his hand, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not alone, not forgotten. Seen. "Tell me about medical school," she said. "Tell me everything. I want to hear it all." And as Daniel began to talk, pulling out his stethoscope to check her heart while sharing stories of long nights studying, and Emma's proud face at his graduation, Margaret understood something profound. Love doesn't always look like family. Sometimes it looks like a young father in a grocery store. Sometimes it looks like a small act of kindness that echoes across years. Sometimes it looks like a doctor making a house call to the woman who once made sure his daughter had a birthday cake. The February cold pressed against the windows again, but inside, the afternoon light was warm, and 2 people who'd once been strangers sat together in the quiet miracle of connection, proof that the smallest gestures can grow into the biggest transformations, and that sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back.